So let's get a word from Harrison Allman-Varty, Conservative Borough Council, the youngest Tory councillor in the land. Harrison, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian. How are you?
All good at this, and nice to have you back with us. This bill, as I mentioned, is being debated literally as we speak. They're in Parliament discussing this. Let's have a listen to the proposer of the bill, Kim Leadbeater, the MP. She's behind it. Here she is speaking about the legislation.
If this piece of legislation passes, it will be the most robust, strictest piece of legislation in terms of choice at the end of life, probably in the world. And I know that means a lot to people. I am very clear that there is a problem that needs to be solved. At the moment, we've got law that is not fit for purpose.
So we have a law that's not fit for purpose, Harrison, and this will be the most robust form of this law compared to any other country that has this in place. Does that satisfy you?
I actually don't disagree. It probably is. She's probably right. But I think the concern is obviously once you start something, how far does it go? Yep. And I think once that process has started, we don't know in a few years how many it's a lot easier to break down barriers once it's already in place than it is at the start. So there is that. I'm with you on this. I am very, very in the middle. And I think do you know what? I actually think the default answer to this is yes, it sounds like a good idea, right? I actually think it is from a sympathetic kind of viewpoint. But I think the more research and stuff I know about it, I think the more less inclined I am to support it. Yeah. Looking at case studies like in Canada and potentially how it's abused. Now, don't get me wrong, if your cat's not well at all, they take the decision that its quality of life is best served no longer being alive and it's to put it down, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a decision made based on quality of life, and there's definitely a lot of people who I'm sure would probably be weighing that up themselves. But I'd be actually interested to know how many people it would affect, because the criteria at the moment is quite strong in the case of you need 2 doctors, you need 6 months. So it'd be interesting to know how many people it would actually cater to. But I personally think for 2 reasons, the slippery slope, and the second one is a sense of guilt in that person, if you are ill and maybe did want to fight it, even when they knew the odds was against us, might feel a sense of guilt to their family if they don't choose that for inheritance, tax reasons, or whatever it might be. I don't know. It
is difficult. It's very easy to slip into that part of the Venn diagram, isn't it? The bit in the middle where I'm not really sure about this. And maybe I'd like to think that's a fairly healthy place to be within the parameters of this debate, because it is of such a serious nature. Look, the legislation apparently says, you have to be terminally ill. There's got to be 2 doctors that are able to assess and verify that. There's going to have to be a judge that looks at the legislation as well. You can't just take, Auntie Mary down to the clinic and get her a couple of lethal jabs and have done with. That's not going to happen. But of course, as I said at the outset, the problem as I see it with this is, where are we in 10 years with this? Do we loosen up some of the criteria? Where does it sit within the mental health considerations of people who no longer want to carry on? So I think there's very good reason to be reserved about it, but that doesn't mean that we've got to vote against it.
I mean, it kind of already happens a little bit. If you are very seriously ill, if you're in a hospice or you're receiving end-of-life care, you're generally receiving high dosages of morphine, and that morphine is generally what would kill an individual who's already pretty ill.
Yeah. We hear of medical people sort of upping the dose unofficially and things like that.
Yeah, you watch some shows. I remember watching, when you're putting on Traffic Cops or whatever it might be, and sometimes they do the ambulance people come around, and some guy was, over 100 and he just got a chest infection or something. And he was like, I can't, and they're like, oh, do we give you antibiotics? But he was like, no, I just can't do it anymore. And I think there is something, and look, this isn't my field, but there is something, I think, whether it is morphine or whatever, where they almost kind of do help you transition. It is such a tricky one, though, isn't it? Because it's like, I think even if you're given 6 months, you're probably already in a pretty bad state already.
Yeah.
There is, to be fair, there is some cases. Now we're talking very minimal, but there will be some cases where people do actually recover Now, like I said, we are probably talking very, very few amounts. It's almost like it's probably the same amount of people who, if you were to bring in the death penalty, they'd go, oh, what happens if they're proven innocent kind of thing. We're talking that type of figures. But there is the case of if someone who has been signed off by 2 doctors who is very terminally ill, but miraculously does have some sort of recovery, then it's an argument of, is that a
you only need one person to have that story, and that, you know, again, changes things, doesn't it? And I suppose, but also, you know, the other side is that if you are terminally, you know, you can be terminally ill and stuck in a bed, unable to do anything for months. And I can understand why there is not a lot of dignity in that position. And it would be immensely frustrating and troubling for some patients to be there, and they'd rather not. I mean, who doesn't understand that?
I know, I completely understand, and I think from not to sound too crude, but even like, and it's awful saying this because at the end of the day, it's people's lives, but from a cost-saving perspective as well, I'm sure there'll probably be quite a lot of people who are just kept alive kind of for the sake of keeping alive.
Yeah.
And whose, I reckon, if they were in sound mind, probably would not want to be in the state they're in. You know, Michael Schumacher, right, for example, horrible accident. He's barely with us. I think he's brainstem dead, something like that, which means he's got no brain activity, but his heart's still beating. So he's technically still alive. Now, if you ask someone like him, oh, if you're ever in that state, would you want to keep, you know, I probably, with the lifestyle he lived and how active he was, he probably wouldn't. So I think it's a case of, it is very tricky. And I think that's someone who's kind of being kept alive for the sake of being alive. And I reckon that would solve a few issues. But like I said, if I was an MP, I wouldn't know how to vote.
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
I probably would vote no.
Okay, let's get a word on this one, Harrison. Gregg Wallace, he's the fella from the MasterChef show for the uninitiated. He's broken his silence after being accused by multiple colleagues of sexual misconduct. One of them, broadcaster Kirsty Walk, of course, former Newsnight host, quite a big deal at the BBC. She's one of the people that's got involved in this. She's one of the accusers. Here's what she had to say.
There were 2 occasions in particular where he used sexualized language in front of a number of people. And it wasn't as if it was anyone engaged with this. It was completely one-way traffic. But I think people were uncomfortable. And something that I really didn't expect to happen.
Well, that was Kirsty Walk speaking. Much of the... from what I can gather, it's always tricky when you talk about this stuff, Harrison, but from what I can gather, this seems to be the fact that he had quite a sort of salty mouth, that he was very vocal and, you know, innuendo, sexualised language, that kind of thing. From what I know, there may be other incidences in there. It's worth playing you a response from him, though, bearing in mind there's a lot of noise around this and he's stood down, forced to quit over these sexual comments to, I think, 13 colleagues. Here's Gregg Wallace's response on social media.
I would like to thank all the people getting in touch, reaching out and showing their support. It's good of you. Thank you very much.
So that's all he really says on this. It's interesting, he didn't say, you know, I deny anything happened here, and maybe there's a legal reason why he hasn't said that. Maybe he's not going to deny and say, yeah, I was a bit like a kind of 1970s stand-up comedian. But I wasn't a sex pest. I wasn't some kind of weirdo in that respect. But yeah, that's the kind of way my humour works. Now, that's not desirable. I don't know whether it should be career-ending, but that seems to be almost the nub of this debate, Harrison.
It is tricky because exactly we don't want to get caught off guard defending someone who has done.
Correct. Yes.
So it is tricky. I'd like to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit, within reason. I think he's probably been victim to the tide turning on him, and not just him, but just jokes, humour,
yes.
Maybe edgy jokes, a little bit, a bit close to the wire. I think, you know, I personally think that if he's not touched anyone or been inappropriate physically, I think that's one thing, right? If he's done that, then I think, right, that's quite hard to defend. But if it is just a case of jokes, amongst people that he thought were mates that he was working with,
yeah,
It's quite hard to bring someone down on that. Now, it probably was quite hard, but now I guess all you have to say it. I mean, they probably don't even have to prove it. And
well, that's the trouble now, isn't it? I mean, I notice even Rod Stewart apparently is one of the people that has criticised his behaviour. But I mean, again, nobody wants to make light of this, and nobody wants to get caught sort of defending someone if we then find out something awful has happened. But, you know, if Rod Stewart has come... Is this Gregg Wallace singing Do You Think I'm Sexy while gyrating near a turkey or something? You know, I can imagine that, which would be probably, you know, unsightly and to many people uncalled for. But I don't know whether that makes you a serial sex offender if you do that. It probably makes you a bit of a... Well, I can't really use the word on air, but I'm not sure you have your career wrecked over it. A warning would be good, wouldn't it?
You know, it doesn't even have to be true for your career to be over. I mean, look, let's put it this way. If I came forward and said, Ian Collins is a bully and all this sort of stuff, and I really went for you, Ian, completely... Oh, no, with no basis.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's what the news will be talking about. They go, oh, this about income. And then before you know it...
well, that's what happens, isn't it? I mean,
there used to be charities they've pulled out and all that sort of stuff, even if you're completely innocent. Now, we don't live in this innocent until proven guilty anymore.
Well... I remember somebody saying to me that, you know, on a quiet day in some newspapers, somebody in an office would say, well, you know, what happens if we got a phone call saying, you know, Mickey Smith is a sex offender, you know, well-known personality. So let's ring Mickey Smith up and ask him, say, someone said you're a sex offender, is it true? No, that's not true. Front page, Mickey Smith denies being a sex offender. So, wow, I mean, that's where does poor old Mickey Smith go with that? Nothing ever happened. Now... If you like, front bench senior resignation since coming into power back in July. She's resigned after a stolen mobile phone fraud conviction was revealed. Mike Graham this morning called for her resignation live on air, and you'll never guess what happened. Have a listen.
She lied, and she was convicted of fraud, and she's a Minister of the Crown. I find it extraordinary. She'll surely have to resign, won't she? Yeah. Oh, hello. Breaking news. She's just resigned. Are you serious? Louise Haigh has just resigned. She's obviously started listening to Morning Glory, and she's 10 minutes in and she's gone, I can't take this. So Louise Haigh. So another one bites the dust.
Yes.
What a shambles this government has become. Deary me. Deary me. Sorry. Standards in public life he's going to restore. So then he appointed a woman who's a convicted fraudster to be the Transport Secretary.
I knew Mike would like that. There was about 5 minutes between him saying she should resign and her resigning. The story goes something like this. I won't go over the full details, Harrison, but apparently she claimed for a phone that had been stolen, and then it was revealed that it hadn't been stolen. She says it was an honest error because the phone was then found. When it was found, she go, oh, it's been found, but by then she'd claimed or something of that nature. And I think also she worked for an insurance company as well, which, isn't a good look.
I mean, I don't believe it, personally. I mean, it's low grade, isn't it? I mean, at best. I think, look, it's an offence, and I think... everybody stopped talking about Rachel Reeves. I'm pretty sure lying on your CV is an offence. Well, she certainly lied on her LinkedIn because everybody saw that change for what it was. But no, I think, look, it's not good news for Starmer, this, obviously, because he's already had a resignation from Rosie Duffield, hasn't he? And obviously but obviously she wasn't in cabinet. But she's gone, and I think... She's gone quick, actually. I think they've done that on purpose because they didn't want the media to kind of drag it out.
Yep.
They could sense Mike breathing down their neck. Although I did see a bit of a take online by basically saying this was 10 years ago and, we're setting the bar too high for cabinet ministers and all that rubbish, but I don't think so.
Well, if you're a fraudster, I'm sorry, I know that probably to many people overstates it, but, it's a fraud conviction, then I don't think you can serve in the cabinet. And also the other compromising point, some people in defence go, well, she's not the Home Secretary, she's the Transport Secretary. She looks after flipping trains and buses, for goodness sake. Does this really matter? But she'll also have a say on senior appointments of British Transport police officers. So... there is an element to this where there's a crossover that could be, you know, compromising. It's just not a good look.
No, it's not. I mean, yeah, exactly. If you fraud your way onto getting a train without paying a ticket, you're the big boss is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you can't get all high and mighty about it because you once, you know, essentially nicked a phone and
but, you know,
pretended it had been lost.
Her job's done, though. She's awarded the big pay packages to her buddies in the unions and the train drivers. I'm sure she will go feeling satisfied, and she will claim about her record on resolving those. She's done it, really, hasn't she? That's the biggest thing she would have done in her role.
Well, that's true. I guess, you know, I mean, does a part of me feel sorry for her? Not really, other than the fact that she had, you know, less than 5 months as a government Secretary of State, and that's a position she can never ever hold again.
But did she, I mean, with this story, was it known, like, or did it just come out? Because I wonder if it would be different, and maybe she did this, but I wonder if it would have been different if she went, look, I've got this part of my history, which I'm not proud of, hands up, this is something that I got wrong.
Yeah, maybe.
But it sounds like it's been discovered or someone's uncovered it.
Well, Starmer knew about it. Starmer knew about it before he appointed her before they won the election. So he was aware of it.
But I think that's something that should be, if you know it's going to come out in the public domain, catch it before it does. And I think if she did, she'd probably still be in the job. If she went out and said, look, in all transparency, I've got a piece of history that I'm not proud of. And she could maybe level with a few people and say, look, I'm sure you've maybe done things you weren't proud of.
Yeah, I was like, you know, I was in my early 20s. It was a bit dumb, or it was. She's claiming it was a mistake, an honest error. But I don't think that washes anymore, really, does it? Harrison, fabulous to have you on. Have an amazing weekend. He's Harrison Allman-Varty, Conservative commentator and Conservative councillor as well, the youngest Tory councillor in the land. Thank you to him.